Windows, except XP. Few of them would. Probably not Vista or Vista 7, but the only logical step now is just just move to a distribution of Linux, and
Well,
this.
there is some people cashing in on its redundancy, as it were, because I've seen a couple of companies that have been written about in some of the mainstream press that's offering support and security and etc. etc. For people that aren't wishing to move. I mean, it's certainly not an option for the home user who sat with XP stuffed up on their desktop machine, but for a corporation that's maybe got 100,000 deployments of it, it might be a cheaper alternative rather than a complete migration to anything.
Well, how long for?
I don't know.
And also, these computers are fairly old. Remember, this is really getting along in the tooth. So if you pay people, I don't know, 20, 30,000 a year, and a computer that's new would cost you less than £1,000 to buy, productivity would matter to you. And so
one thing I would say about any sort of migration to any different ecosystem or operating system is that people say about retraining, and I think that's over exaggerated when they say, people switching from say a Windows to a Linux system, they need retraining, and it's going to cost you more to retrain all your staff than it would be to upgrade to our latest.
They can still use the old applications and application servers. And this is what we do for one of the clients is, let's say you want to take them out of an XP environment. The major barrier usually is they have applications that weren't designed for other versions of Windows or something. So all you need to do is to make sure you have a server somewhere that's capable of running those things and people can remotely connect to it. They can use Linux. There's no issue with that. They can use remote desktop or VNC or something. And they can use it.
I think it's very different now because, for example, I've deployed a lot of Linux to users of Windows. I hasten to add these are home users and just average people who have a computer for average means around the houses. They're certainly not corporations. And I've deployed Linux to them. And over the years, what I've noticed now is the amount of, for want of a better word, training in order to show them the differences and say, look, this works slightly different to what we're used to. This is better because this does it this way. Is less because, and the reason why it doesn't need so much training is because we do so much of our everyday living in the browser.
Yeah.
And of course, Chromium on Linux is exactly the same as Chromium on any other operating system.
And the interface of the browser is usually within the page itself. As opposed to the browser is just back and forth.
And as long as they can read an icon that says Chromium or Firefox or whatever, it's really, there's no more training that's needed to be done than that. What I have noticed recently, actually, funnily enough, was a lot of people that I've given Linux to using DOSBox a lot, which is quite a nice little utility for them to have on the machine.
Some corporations use it as well.
Yeah.
They use things like FoxPro still. And in some cases even other operating systems, so they use some emulation or compatibility layers.
Well, it's mainly because the people that I've deployed Linux to are from the old school of text adventures and things like we were mentioning earlier, King's Quest and Sierra Online games, and there's probably no better way to get the original experience than to run it in DOSBox. And it's a very modest little package because it's not one that you hear talked about all the time. You hear MAME, which is a multiple arcade machine emulator, and that's talked about quite often. It's a very big project on Linux.
Well, you have FreeDOS, so it shouldn't be so hard to write something that runs those applications.
But like I said, it's a very modest package because DOSBox works incredibly well. It is incredibly efficient little utility. And it's like I say, you've got so many options now within the Linux operating system to get that old functionality back on for old packages that use. I mean, I know many companies that use very, very old DOS programs, and they've got no reason to change because it works and it does exactly what their staff who've been there for 10, 15, 20 years expect it to do, and there's no issues. And this is where, for the rest of the staff, where they're using most of the stuff in the browser, I mean, many of the big organisations I've been exposed to use a lot of web-based applications themselves within an intranet, which they've developed themselves. And really, all you require is a browser. And in fact, using Internet Explorer is probably the worst possible solution. And they openly embrace things like Chromium or Firefox or whatever. So yeah, it's the migration issues now and the retraining issues are really a non-starter. And I would expect, especially with things like crossover or I've had a mental blank now about the other, but Wine. You've got applications like that, and there's no reason why. Certainly, for a lot of new utilities that you may want to run, you may already find there's Wine compatibility. So there is no real training issues.
Wine has been incredibly useful actually when migrating the company to it's any other operating system for that matter. It can be some form of Unix or BSD, but they want to be able to run the applications at least temporarily as a kind of a cushion, because and Wine is doing a very good job running those applications. It doesn't encourage developers to develop it, for a certain API the way Mono does. But given that they're stuck with a binary that only runs on Windows and was designed for Windows, it would be useful to have it running under.
It's also quite nice. I mean, there's certain little packages, proprietary packages that you stumble across on the net, and you would like to have a look at them. And Wine excels. I mean, I've chucked quite a lot of stuff at Wine, which obviously isn't on the compatibility chart because it's really secure, what's the word I'm looking for? I've now lost the second word. It's really obscure, and I've chucked it at Wine. It's loaded fine. The nice thing about Wine is it's so transparent, and unless you actually know that you're using Wine and make a conscious decision to use it, I know if I put it onto one of the people's machines I installed Linux on, they wouldn't even know. They would assume it was just a Linux piece of software, because unless you look for the subtle differences and look at the windows, you really don't notice the difference. And I mean, I'm looking at my desktop now, and I'm running Peppermint 4 at the moment. I think we covered this very briefly last episode. And really, if people are loving XP and they don't want to leave that, there is very little difference in an XP desktop to Peppermint 4. I look at my start menu, and it's got a menu instead of a start word. It has a slightly different icon, which is a peppermint stick type thing rather than the Windows logo. But everything else is pretty much exactly the same. I've got a nice little landscape background. I have all my icons on the desktop and a few things in the start menu. But it's all looking pretty much like XP. And if you were to show somebody who didn't know computers or have an interest in them and say, do you like my XP desktop, you probably wouldn't even notice at all. When you get into the realms of people using Chromium and people using Thunderbird for their email as well because Outlook's horrible, really there's no reason why they can't switch over with no training whatsoever. In fact, quite contrary, because a lot of people now using smartphones are very used to a software center, or what's Linux had for many years. They've had software managers and software centers where you install software like you do on a mobile phone, which is something that they're used to, which is very different to the days of going onto Windows, downloading an exe file, installation file, installing it, and then clicking the yes/no prompts. This does everything for you. There's even places where people can look at the package on their software center and see the reviews, so they can see other people's opinions on the software, and they know that they're not going to be downloading a virus, or virtually guaranteed they won't be downloading a virus, because it's coming straight from the repo itself, not from some possibly dodgy website.
Has Microsoft ever gotten around to having something similar implemented either for Windows or for the mobile platform?
I don't know. I mean, when I say I haven't used Windows since 2008, I haven't. I mean, I've used it briefly, like for when an employer might be using it, and I've had to go onto a machine, and I might have used a bit of Microsoft Office, but physically sitting down exploring Windows, I've never done since I was dual booting XP in 2008, and then Vista came along and decided I'd go 100% Linux.
So Apple's following the footsteps. So
I think Windows 8. I think Windows 8 has a software center of sorts. I'm sure it does.
Okay. So at least two people are happy now.
Yes, but I mean, yeah, it's funny that Linux has had this for so many years, and Linux has had the stereotype of being inaccessible to new users. Yet Linux has had the software manager, which is something that everybody's
Well, the
loving to use on
branding
their
of
phones. Yeah.
the name recognition of the. I mean, today I found an application. I couldn't even tell you the name. Starts with K4, and it's basically an application which